I'll start by apologizing for my voice because I'm at the end of an impressive sinus infection and feeling much better now, but my voice is still not as it should be, so I hope you will be able to endure. With that said, the reason for this short episode is about a question I asked in the forum not that long ago. And it was a two-parter. First one was a poll asking members if they felt like responding, how many different styles of martial arts or self-defense systems that they actively trained in. And with active, I mean at least several months or longer of just regular training, not just you doing a class to try it out, not just training, informally with a friend for like 10, 15 minutes, but really following instruction and being at the very least, several months in or longer. And the results were interesting. Obviously there's selection bias here because my group is it consists of about 400 members, but not everybody responds, and it's hard to basically parse the data. But I found the interesting part was that 70% of the people who responded had done between 1 and 5 styles. So that is quite a lot. In my experience, many people who practice martial arts tend to stick with one style, but the four members turned out that, training multiple styles was something that was specifically in, in their way of thinking, in their way of viewing training, self-defense, and so on. Why do I say that? Well, I'm 51, so when I started training, things were very different from now. You couldn't just find an MMA gym or a dojo on any corner of a street, figuratively speaking, like you can do now. There was not that much to choose from. There was no internet, there was no YouTube, there were no really famous martial artists, except that maybe some movie stars and then some. But things changed gradually. And nowadays, you just have this abundance of choice. So going to train in multiple arts and systems is not that difficult nowadays. Whereas way back when, you had to really go out of your way, sometimes out of the country, to actually find the style that you were looking for. So I guess I'm getting old. That's one part of the answer. And the other part is that times change, so things change. I see this as a good thing. More choice, in my opinion, is almost always better than less choice. And it also means that people who start with a specific art and they might have given up because it wasn't a good fit for them can now transition into something else that works better for their circumstances, their personality, what they're looking for, their body type, and so on. So this is a toast to all the many teachers and coaches out there who are committed to teaching their art, their system, and bringing these options to anybody who's interested. As opposed to, again, like I said, when I was young, where there was just such limited choice that you had no other option but to take what is available to you. Like I was lucky when I started. There was a dojo that would teach twice a week at about 10-minute walk from my house in the small town next to where I lived. So that was really lucky. If I wanted to do something else, it would be at the easiest a bike ride for me because I was driving a bicycle when I was a kid to get around. And it would have been at least a 20-minute bike ride to get to class, which is not impossible, but still, it's not like a 10-minute walk. And when I say 10 minutes, that's walking very slowly to the next town. So Belgium's small, don't forget. So life has changed dramatically, and I wanted to ask the members of the group is okay, specifically for everybody who who did answer in the poll. I had some questions like most people studied anywhere between 1 to 5 styles. Okay, so why did you stick with those and you didn't look further? Because we do have a bunch of people who actually trained more. It's like 16% had between 5 and 8 styles that they actively trained in, 6% 8 to 10, and then 5% more than 10 styles or systems. I tried to count mine. I've been training for almost 40 years now, and I'm sure I lost track somewhere. But I was up to about 14, 15 different styles and systems that I really intensely trained in. So that's quite a lot. Now, it's not that difficult to get to that high count if you've been training for almost 40 years. That's a lot of time to train and to try new things. If you've only been training for 10, 15 years, but you haven't had that much time to train other stuff. So there's a little bit of a bias there in looking at the data that way, and you have to keep that in mind. But all the answers were interesting, so that's why I asked the question. So I asked so for some more feedback, and it was something that came consistently out of the answers was availability for a variety of reasons. Like Steve said, like for me, it was because I was in the military and moved constantly. I couldn't find the same styles in the different places, so I'd take what I could get: kung fu, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, and so on. And then it goes like, then I retired and got old and crippled, and picked up some Tai Chi and Filipino arts. Once again, based on availability of classes in my area. Um, and it's the same thing Travis said, part of it is moving around, and with that, 2 of the 4 towns I lived in had schools with multiple styles. So 4 styles came from one school and 3 at another, and so on that. So that's in part what I lived through when I was younger, and with what I can see from Steve and Travis as well, is that whatever's available, and especially if you move a lot, if you're in the military or for whatever reason your job or your life requires you to move regularly, consistently training in one specific style or system is going to be difficult. If you want to keep on training, you're gonna have to open your mind and accept that, well, I can't really do what I was doing, but this is better than not training anything at all, even if it's not maybe 100% of what you liked or wanted to do. And you have to kind of start from scratch a little bit. Then it's better than just not doing any training and picking up pool or darts or any other sport. Especially if you're very enthusiastic about training in martial arts, like many other people, obviously in the forum are, and I am as well. So that is something that definitely is a huge factor, is what's available. And there there were a few other system answers, sorry, that would come back consistently, and one of them is try to find something that is appropriate for your own personality, your own style, meaning your own physical abilities, your own personality, your own circumstances. Like Gavin said, like for me, it's just simply self-defense. Like when it comes to technique, I can feel that you can argue semantics all day. Is an elbow better in Muay Thai or karate? I don't want to be hit by either one of them, is what Gavin said, which makes good sense. All I need is a solid set of fundamental techniques and a good approach to methodology, and I feel that I have that. I don't train for a hobby, so I'm not really keen on trying every technique there is, and that is a very, very legitimate point of view, in my opinion, which is where we get into one of the aspects that is sometimes difficult for people to understand if they come from, if they're very much interested in martial arts, in the training, in the systems, and so on, is that somebody who comes from the need of having self-defense skills is most likely not as interested in learning the intricacies of certain systems or getting to black belt or whatever level that you might have, but more like, I need something that works right now, and I don't want to spend 15 years to train to attain mastery in whatever system you're selling before I can do that, before I can use those skills. So then you often end up, in my experience, trying a few different things, and if something works for you, you stick with it. And the end result is that you have a bunch of functional techniques that will work in the most common situations that you find yourself in. And if that is what works for you, and then you have some experience with that, so you can pull that off in real life, well, why would you go look further? That makes total sense to me. Now, I've trained a lot of people who were similar to that. And one of the things that I found is why I also have a training group of a bunch of crazy guys like me, who like to just beat each other up. And you train with other people who have similar training or different training, but a similar mindset. And it's about experimenting. And I've had that I showed stuff like, okay, this is a neat trick that I picked up in style or system X, Y, and Z. And then, okay, I think this might be a good solution to the problem that you just mentioned. Like, okay, you're having trouble with this technique. How about we try it this way? And it doesn't matter where it comes from. What matters is that for the person that I'm giving that tool to, is like, okay, this fixes something that I have an issue with. This is a solution to my specific problem, and that problem is related to self-defense. I need this for whatever environment that I am, whatever specific situation that he lives in. He discovers this problem. Okay, I need a fix, and it's that mindset that I like a lot as well with training with people who don't really care about traditional martial arts or getting a instructor certificate in whatever new self-defense system that is out there. They just want the skills. They want to be able to defend themselves, to survive if they live in a rough environment, and they don't really care where it comes from. There's a lot of value in that, and in that regard, what Gavin said, like only 1 to 3 styles, is a really good way to start. And then there's a lot of, I think, nuance or additional skills that you layer on top of those basics that you learn that work so well for you. There's a lot of addition and refinement that you can get from working with like-minded people who have similar life experiences but come from a different technical background. Because in the end, if your focus is self-defense, everybody just wants to survive. So a lot of the, let's say, woo-woo stuff and nonsense and not immediately practical stuff is going to be cast aside. Sometimes that's to the detriment in the long run, but that's something that I'll leave for another episode. So I'm going over to a few more answers, and there's a few that I actually really liked. And this was Michael. He said 1 to 5, not enough time, and also there seems to be redundancy after a certain point. Only so many variations for striking and grappling. I agree and disagree, but that is also for different for different reasons and for different podcasts. I'm not going to into it now. But he mentions also knee injuries limit my grappling. This is something that I very much feel myself, given all the injuries that I've had, and it very much limits what I can do right now. It's not that I can't train hard anymore. It's just that I have to be very careful about certain things because I don't want to get injured. Now I'm in the sense that if I get injured now in specific joint or in a specific way, it's going to be a permanent injury that will drastically reduce my quality of life for the rest of my life until I die. That's something that, why would I do that? At my age, I don't really feel the need to compete. Um, there's no immediate threat on my life that I'm aware of. I'm not living in a war zone. So there's no real need to push things beyond a certain level and go look for certain risks. For instance, I'm teaching one of my students. I'm training him for pushing hands competitions, which is a form of wrestling basically, but too long to go into here. And we trained pretty hard for the last year, and he's competed several times very successfully. And one of the things he saw is that there's different kinds of competitions that way, different formats. And one of them basically is wrestling. It's like you're on a mat, and pretty much all the grappling techniques, throwing techniques, stripping, sweeps, and so on you can do. But he's about my age, and one of the things he saw is a lot of injuries. A lot of people get injured, and then you're like, okay, is that just a good idea? Well, no. In many of these competitions, you're not allowed to compete that way once you're past 40. Why? Because the risk of permanent injuries is so great. If you go to, let's say, whatever grappling competition that you want, and that there's a decent level, whether it's judo, whether it's wrestling, whether it's BJJ, whatever, you're going to see a fair amount of injuries when you can go all out and slam people on the floor and so on. So that is a huge component of picking styles and sticking with one style or moving away from one style towards another. One of my teachers who passed away, unfortunately, Bob Orlando, uh, he went through that process, did a style with a lot of high kicks, but then his back got totally messed up. Vertebrae had to be fused, so he couldn't do it anymore. So he had to change styles and adapt what he already knew because it just didn't work. His body didn't function that way anymore. And this is one of those things that comes back to haunt us when we're older. If in our younger years we abused our bodies, like I did, and then the wear and tear gets to such a point where all of a sudden, like the things you took for granted in your 20s and 30s, all of a sudden, like, nope, your body doesn't allow you to do that anymore because you broke it down too much. So that is a huge component of switching styles and focus. And I think that's one of the benefits of, like I said, having all this choice now is that you can go train your whole life and train very hard when you're young. And then as you get older and figure out like, okay, the abuse that I put my body through is not worth it anymore. I can switch to something that still works well, that doesn't tear me down, but actually keeps me healthy in the long run. So that's um, that's something that I liked a lot with some of the answers. And then and the final one I want to mention is what James said is that I stayed with my current style for many reasons. One, because I like my teachers and fellow students. That's a big one. I can't tell you how many times that I went to gyms and dojos where there was just this bad vibe, especially towards newcomers where it's like, who are you and why would we let you train with us? Maybe it's gotten better now because I don't go to many different places as much as I used to. But there was a lot of that, especially in the full contact combat sports gyms and so on. There was a lot of that attitude, like new guy, let's beat him up and see what he's got. Okay then. So liking the teachers and the students is really great. Um, I try to have that in my class, in my MMA class, because that's where it's the most the most at risk for attitudes and egos to clash and create problems. Is every new guy who comes in, he gets a speech, and the speech ends with the most important thing is that after class we can all go through the same door. Meaning, it's like we come to class, you leave all your shit, all your bullshit outside class, outside the door. You train, we have fun, you get a good workout, you learn new stuff, everybody's happy, and you can go home and we get along just fine. That's the goal. And you can leave your ego at the door just like everybody else. And if you don't like it, you can leave it, it's fine as well. But no nonsense, no fighting wars in the gym, no, taking cheap shots and so on. None of that. I'm fortunate in that my MMA class, we're not competitive. I don't teach competitive fighters anymore. So I can focus on technique and drills and just having a good time, having a good workout without basically beating the crap out of each other all the time. Because if you want to compete, the intensity needs to be high. Not always, but it has to happen. Otherwise, you're not ready for competition. So as I don't do that anymore, I don't attract that crowd as much. And if they do come, and I have that regularly, guys coming from Muay Thai gyms or other MMA gyms, I'm like, look, this is how we train. I prefer to be more technical and work on that kind of stuff than on just seeing if we can knock each other out or hitting as hard as we can. You don't learn anything. You already know how to do that. And the example I always give is when you go to Thailand and train Muay Thai, there is sparring, but there is not that going as hard as you possibly can, trying to knock each other out, because they fight pretty much every week. If they want, they fight very regularly. So if they have all these wars in the gym, their body's beat up by the time they have the fight. So they can't compete very well. It's just a lot of technique, conditioning, sure, on the heavy bag, on the Thai pads, and so on, kicking shield, sure. A lot. Then you go hardcore, you go all out. But with your training partner, He's gonna make a living too. So why would you beat him up? I mean, it's a team effort. Training partners, you have to work with each other so that you all get better and everybody gets to rise and hopefully be successful, make a lot of money fighting and so on. So that kind of mindset can very well work here in the West as well. It just takes a coach to make sure that all that stuff is kept under control. That when egos flare, it's one of the things I also say during that speech. Whenever somebody's going too hard, you have to tell them, okay, can we go a little bit lighter? Because you know your limits. Sometimes people do it by accident, things escalate, that's fine. Somebody pulls the brakes, the other guy has to do that and has to calm down. If they don't, just come to me and I'll put you with somebody else. I'll put the guy who's going too hard on the heavy bag or talk to him and so on. No harm, no foul, no escalation into all out fighting. We can get along. It's fine. It's just you run a tight ship as a coach or you don't. Now again, this is me speaking as somebody who is no longer teaching competitive fighters. I only want guys. I mean, I have sometimes competitors that come into train to work on specific issues and technical aspects. But I'm like, if you're here to beat up all the students, of course you can. All the people here train twice a week because they want to have a good time, they like to learn, and so on. And sure, we'll do some conditioning and intense training again on the pads, heavy bag, and so on. That wipes everybody out. That's not difficult, getting people to be tired, but we want to for sure make the environment that you really want to come back to class as opposed to dreading coming to class because you're going to get beat up again. But I went on a rant, so I'll go back to James's answer. So first is he likes his teachers and fellow students. And second one is because the art itself has a large syllabus that very few people have completed, maybe like 2 or 3 in the world. I want to see what's at the end of that journey. Um, I found that in many styles, many systems, including self-defense systems that supposedly are not that complex or don't have that big a syllabus, the depth of study that you can do is typically underestimated by most people. They're like, okay, I'll make black belt in whatever 5 years, and then there's that many grades after. I'll do that in 10 years, and then I'll be at the end of it. Like, well, maybe technically speaking, yes, but there's so much to learn, and you just keep on scraping deeper into that barrel, and you never find the bottom because new layers are always there. That's my experience. I've talked with many people who've trained for just as long as I have or longer, and most of them find this to be true. Is that if you're open to it, you can definitely learn a lot of stuff, and that's a long-term commitment, and I think that's the key is you keep on training. Now, there was there was one more thing that I want to add, and as an answer, like well, from people like why do you train multiple arts? And that's from Michael, and the last thing he said is that I learned not to be dogmatic about martial arts, to be open-minded, not just accept things due to tradition. This is something that is fundamentally difficult to understand if you only train in one system or you train in 2, maybe 3, or even more systems, but they're all from a similar area, from a similar background, from a similar time period, and so on. So if you only train, Chinese arts, you only train Japanese arts, or you only train Indonesian arts, it's going to be more difficult for you to understand and not understand theoretically, but on a practical level, that there's a large variety out there of different systems that can all work and that might even work better against your best stuff than you'd expect. But if you're never exposed to that, that's going to be difficult. Not that you don't, theoretically want to believe it because, you assume, okay, I'm sure that must exist. But it's one thing doing that. It's something else being, experiencing it like, oh, wow. I thought this was actually a good technique, but here's a system that has the perfect answer for that and exposes the vulnerability in what you learned before. This is a matter of being humble and like Michael said, being open-minded, not just accept whatever your teacher says, like, okay, this is how it is, and blah blah blah, and not have dogma, not have this dogmatic thinking, like this is how it is, this is how it's supposed to be, it's always going to be like this is the best thing ever, or and so on. But be open-minded. That is my experience of training in 14, 15 different styles, is that some I liked a lot, some I liked a little bit less, some had really good specific things that I could learn, and the rest was not that much for me. But I could see how other people could make it work, but I couldn't. Like I've said many times before, Taekwondo, it's not for me. Um, I did a little bit, not regularly like I mentioned, but I did a few times, and like this isn't for me. This just doesn't work for a variety of reasons. And but I know guys who are excellent at it, and including for self-defense, which is going to shock a lot of people nowadays. But especially some of the old school Taekwondo was much better for self-defense than many people think. So it's perfectly possible to accept that a style or system that you feel is a horrible fit for you is actually very valuable for somebody else. One of the ways you can achieve that mindset without going through all that training is something that, again, the late Bob Orlando asked of his black belt students. And what they had to do, I never had to do that because I never got to black belt, and then Bob passed away. But you had to make a map of different styles, meaning you you start in the center if you like, and you write down Orlando, Silat Kuntao, Kuntao Silat, is what he was teaching. Like, this is a style that I learned. All right, what are the different branches of that style? Well, then you get to you do research, like how many styles of Silat are there, how many Kuntao styles are there, and so on. I'm like, okay, you write that down. That's a lot of work to figure that out, and then eventually you have that mapped out. But then you had to continue, and you had to find all other styles and systems of martial arts that are out there, and keep making that map. Now, in the end, you have a huge map, right? The point is not necessarily to have 100% accuracy in that map, but the point, as Bob explained to me, was to teach some humility, to teach you, like, okay, you're a black belt now, but our way of doing things is not the only way. So never forget that. Never forget that we are just one system in an ocean of other systems that may or may not be just as good or even better than anything we do. But keep that open mind, keep that humility. It's like, okay, no matter how good you get, there's a lot of people out there doing different stuff that can also be really good. And that I think, like, okay, except that some other people might have a system that actually kicks your ass, no matter how good you are at your own style. And that, in my opinion, is the true value of training multiple systems, is that you often have to start as a beginner, and you end up getting your ass kicked, or feeling like, okay, I'm really not good at this right now. No matter how much experience that I have to start from scratch. I'm a beginner again, and that teaches humility, and that's a good thing. I just have somebody join my class who's a judo black belt, like decades of judo practice, and he said, like, wow, this is difficult. I'm like, dude, I know exactly where you've been. I've been where you've been. Training many years in one style, starting this new thing, and just the smallest guy in class can toss you around. Like, it's not that what you did before is not good. It's just that this is something else, and you have a lot of new stuff to learn. But that's also the exciting part. That's the fun part. You have a lot of stuff to learn. You can still learn new things that you can see and feel actually work, because you are getting tossed around by somebody almost half your size. So he knows something you don't. And at first, the ego stings a little bit, but then you move past that, and then you can actually learn and make progress. And there's, in my opinion, nothing more rewarding than that. If you have already had the commitment to train for a long time in one art, when you find something that actually is able to quote unquote beat you, well then how much more fun can you have when you learn that as well? and can use it on people of your own style and on the new style as well. Right, so this is a longer episode. I wanted to talk about this a little bit, and I know I went off on some tangents and some rants a little bit. I apologize for that, not because you know by now that this is what I like to do. Again, apologies for my voice. It's my nose is still jammed up from all the snot that's coming out of my sinuses. Sorry for that picture, but you're gonna have to live with it because I have to as well. And I'll wrap things up here. I have a few episodes coming up. I've got one more. It's gonna be really good. It's Jan Kwijhagens, who's an MMA fighter, professional MMA fighter from Belgium. We had a great talk, and that was a fun interview, and that's coming soon. And I'm preparing some more stuff that you guys will like as well. As always, if you want to support the podcast, hit the like button, share, subscribe, share with people who also will find it interesting. Join me on Patreon. There's hundreds of videos and posts and so on there, instructional stuff that you cannot get anywhere else. In January next month, I will start my 6th year on Patreon. Every month, new content, and that is always only available there. The only thing that people seem to forget is that on the podcast, there are almost always bonus episodes when I have guests. And you, as a patron, get to ask the questions. So if there's guests that you're interested in, then that is going to be your ticket to getting questions that maybe you always wondered about that you can ask them. So that's one of the main reasons I think for joining my Patreon is not only you get access to that kind of stuff, but you can ask the guests questions. What do you think, guys? Take care. Have fun.